Imagine, high in the Zagros Mountains, a narrow road cuts through stone and shadow. In early 330 BCE, King Alexander of Macedon, known as Alexander the Great, marches toward the heart of the Persian Empire. Babylon has opened its gates, the city of Susa has surrendered, victory seems inevitable. Yet ahead lies a passage so tight that an army can barely advance in formation. One road, one defile, one mistake could trap thousands of soldiers between sheer rock walls. What Alexander does not yet see is that the heights above the pass are already occupied. Persian defenders watch silently from the ridgelines. Archers, stone throwers, soldiers who know every metre of this terrain. Their commander is Ariobarzanes, charged with blocking the road to Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the empire. The Macedonian column advances below, stretched along the valley floor, unaware that the pass ahead has already been prepared for war. Within minutes, rocks will fall from the cliffs, arrows will strike from both slopes, and the advancing army will discover there is no room to form and nowhere to escape. For the first time in the Asian campaign, Alexander will be forced to turn back, but retreat will not end the battle. The question now is simple. How do you defeat an enemy you cannot even reach? Because somewhere in these mountains, Alexander will attempt one of the most dangerous maneuvers of his campaign. If it fails, the road into the Persian heartland remains closed. If it succeeds, the gates of Persepolis will stand open, and the fate of the Achaemenid Empire will begin to change forever. This is the story of the Persian Gate. The march toward the Persian heartland began far from the mountains. After the collapse of the Persian field army and the flight of its king, Darius III, Alexander entered the cities of Mesopotamia with little resistance. Babylon opened its gates rather than defending its walls. Soon afterward, the city of Susa also surrendered, bringing enormous royal treasuries accumulated over generations of Achaemenid rule. Yet the war itself was not finished. As long as the Persian king remained alive, resistance could still gather around his authority. Alexander understood that victory required more than battlefield success. To break the empire politically as well as militarily, he needed to reach its ceremonial centre, far to the east beyond the rising barrier of the Zagros Mountains. From Susa, the route toward Persis climbed into the Zagros Range, a natural barrier protecting the ancestral homeland of the Persian dynasty. Roads narrowed and valleys tightened as the army moved into rough terrain. To maintain speed, Alexander divided his forces. Parmenion followed the longer royal road with the baggage train, while Alexander chose the shorter mountain route with roughly 17,000 to 20,000 soldiers. The decision allowed rapid movement, but it also meant entering terrain where large formations could not deploy easily. During the ascent, the army encountered resistance from the Usxians, tribal communities controlling key mountain routes. They demanded tribute from passing armies, as they had from Persian forces before. Alexander refused. Fighting followed in the surrounding hills and the settlements were subdued. With that confrontation finished, the route deeper into the mountains appeared secure. Days passed with little sign of organised opposition. The long column stretched through valleys between steep ridges, and confidence grew that the crossing had already been won. Ahead of the army lay a passage known as the Persian Gate. At first the landscape offered little warning. The approach opened into a plain nearly 2 kilometres across where the army could advance in extended formation. Gradually the road narrowed into a steep defile. Cliffs rose sharply, on both sides, turning the valley into a corridor of stone. From below the slopes appeared empty. No banners, no visible defences. The Macedonian column continued forward, unaware that the terrain itself had already been chosen for an ambush. The defence was commanded by Ariobarzanes, a Persian officer determined to block the road into the imperial heartland. His position relied on the terrain itself. From the heights above the pass, archers and infantry could strike directly into the narrow path below. Inside the canyon, Alexander's army could not deploy its phalanx or manoeuvre cavalry effectively. The road allowed movement only in a compressed column. In such terrain, even a smaller defending force could delay a much larger army. The attack began suddenly. Boulders crashing from the cliffs, while arrows descended from both slopes. Units at the rear continued forward, unaware that the front ranks were already under attack. Congestion spread rapidly through the narrow corridor. Soldiers struggled to raise shields as the path filled with incoming troops. The army that had dominated open battlefields now faced an enemy positioned far above them. For the first time in the Eastern Campaign, Alexander's advance was halted, not by a field army but by the mountains themselves. Recognizing the danger, Alexander ordered a withdrawal from the pass. Extracting the army under constant attack proved difficult. Many casualties were left behind along the rocky corridor as the soldiers retreated toward the wider valley. The road toward Persis was now closed. The defenders controlled the heights, and the terrain eliminated the advantages of coordinated formations. Alexander now faced a difficult decision. Another frontal attack would require repeating the same deadly approach. Waiting was equally dangerous. The army stood deep in hostile territory, with supply lines stretched across the mountains behind them. Somewhere in the surrounding ridges, however, there might be another path capable of reaching the Persian rear. Under cover of darkness, selected units began climbing a northern route through the mountains, while part of the army remained in camp to hold Persian attention. The climb was slow and dangerous across unstable ground. Through the night and into the following day, the flanking force moved along ridges overlooking the pass. When they reached positions above the Persian rear, the maneuver was complete. At dawn, the final phase began. Forces near the entrance of the pass advanced again, drawing attention to the front. At the same moment, Alexander's flanking troops descended from the heights behind the defenders. The soldiers who had dominated the ridges now faced attack from two directions. Fighting erupted along the ridgelines and within the narrow pass. Persian defenders attempted to regroup and break through the surrounding forces, but the ambush that had halted the Macedonian advance was now collapsing under pressure from the unexpected flank attack. By midday, the defensive position had been broken. The Persian Gate, which had blocked the army only days earlier, was now open. The road toward the Persian heartland lay ahead once again. The barricade is overrun, the ridgelines fall silent. What began as a perfect ambush ends in brutal close combat among the rocks and narrow paths of the Persian Gate. Ariobarzanes and his defenders fought to block the road to the Persian heartland, and for a moment they succeeded. They forced Alexander to retreat. They halted his advance, but they could not hold the mountains forever. With the pass broken, the road into Persis lies open. Alexander advances toward Persepolis, the ceremonial centre of the Achaemenid Empire, and one of the greatest treasuries of the ancient world. The mountains that briefly stopped his army no longer stand in the way. Months later, the palaces of Persepolis burn. The conquest of Persia continues eastward, but the empire that once ruled these lands has already begun to collapse. And yet the question remains: if a narrow mountain pass could stop the most successful army of the age, how many other moments like this, brief, unseen and almost forgotten, shaped the fall of an empire?